Now, quickly before I go any further, if you could drop a like on the video right now and subscribe to the channel, that would be appreciated. Other than that, let's get into the video. Now, heading into this season, I thought the Warriors were going to be one of the more underrated kind of title contenders. Obviously, people knew they were going to be a good team, but I thought they were going to be right up the top of the list in terms of teams ready to compete. But people just didn't really put them in that category. And since losing Klay Thompson, which is incredibly unfortunate, it's sad to see Klay come off an ACL, one of the most devastating injuries in any sport, particularly lower body injuries, a 1-year recovery kind of thing, and then have an Achilles injury, which is arguably even more devastating. Pretty much two of the most devastating injuries you could suffer in back-to-back years after waiting so long to get back. It's just incredibly devastating to see that happen. But for people to go as far as saying now Golden State won't make the playoffs, that's kind of ludicrous to me, and I think it just sums up how people perceive Steph Curry and the Warriors, and how that perception is just entirely wrong. Because you look at this team, we've seen them before with Kevin Durant, without Kevin Durant, with Klay Thompson, without Klay Thompson, with Draymond Green, without Draymond Green. The one player that's always the common denominator when these guys perform is Steph Curry. And this video isn't just about Steph Curry, it's about the Warriors as a whole, because although I think their title aspirations have definitely taken a shot, I'm not delusional, but I still think they have a chance at competing for a top seed. And then once you compete for a top seed, if you get home court advantage, who knows? They've got the championship experience. They've got the unknown of guys like James Wiseman, Andrew Wiggins. How does he perform in a different environment? How does Kelly Oubre perform, who just had his best year of his career playing on the Suns? Now he gets to play alongside Steph and Draymond and all these guys. And then another guy, Draymond. How does he perform? I thought Draymond was one of the best players in the NBA during the 2019 playoffs, and I think most people would agree with me. But then all of a sudden, he has half a bad year in 2020 when everything's a write-off. He's playing with absolutely no one, and he's washed. People said he was washed heading into 2019, and then how good was he in the playoffs? Averaging a triple-double against the Blazers, doing bits and pieces against the Raptors. Defensively, he was great. He was still like a top 10 passer in the league. One of the most underrated passers, not just currently, one of the most underrated passes, I think, in NBA history. You just have to have that conversation. Who else has had this kind of impact as a playmaker, as a defender, and still gets no respect? Oh, Mr. Triple Single, or someone who's just carried by Steph and Klay. I think you'd find Draymond's probably been more impactful to this Warriors team than Klay. This isn't trying to disrespect Klay, but Draymond's in his prime, when Draymond has been delivering, his defense, his playmaking, his audibles, everything he does offensively and defensively is just remarkable. It's something that I think is probably one of the most underrated things of the decade, just how good a player he has been. So to think he's just going to fall off a cliff and be non-existent come this year when he's relied upon to have a bigger role, I think you're kidding yourselves. Now the Warriors know obviously it's going to be a tougher challenge without Klay, but Steph has heard the chatter, the Warriors team have heard the chatter, and they said this: we know we can compete with anyone in the league. We know how great Klay is. Don't get me wrong, but we hear the chatter. It's the end for us. This year is a wash. We know the Lakers are the defending champs. We've got to beat them. We're ready for it. And I think that sums it up. People have just washed off this year. They've written it off. Golden State, no chance of competing for a championship. No chance of doing anything of note because they've lost Klay Thompson. And does this hurt their chances significantly? Yes. When you lose your third, second best player, depending on how Draymond plays, obviously you're going to be in a far worse position when you already had question marks heading into the year, considering you guys were all coming off injuries. But to think that they won't make the playoffs, to think that they won't at least compete for something, like, come on. Let's look at the James Wiseman acquisition. Wiseman was a prospect that people either really loved or really hated. But the reason people really loved it is because he's got intangibles that you just can't teach. He's 7 foot with that 7'6" wingspan, incredibly athletic. He shot about 75% in his limited time from the free throw line in college, which suggests to me not only will he step out and be a mid-range kind of shooter, hit those little 12-foot, 14-foot shots, there's every chance he turns into some kind of a three-point shooter, which I know he's practiced all the way since high school, and I know he's been talking about how he's practiced that in his time off, which he's had a lot of time to do, over a year pretty much to do, since his last game in Memphis. if he can get some semblance of a three-point shot and then have his rim rolling, have his rim protection, just be a dominant force from day dot, which people thought he was going to be. Heading into the season in Memphis, he was the unanimous number 1 overall pick. He was unanimous among most people as one of the best prospects we've seen in a while. That's what people were saying. People were saying, this is the new unicorn. I heard people saying this is like an Anthony Davis light. This is an Anthony Davis 2.0. And imagine if the Warriors got that version of him, which we don't know if we're going to get that or not, because we haven't seen this guy play pretty much at all. He played like 2 college games or what? A couple of college games? 1 college game? I don't even know. I know he didn't play much in college. He did have a couple of dominant performances when he did play. And since then, he's just been working out in the gym, which could be for better or for worse. And if it's for better and he's developed a three-point shot to go along with all of the intangibles and all of the things we already know he has, don't sleep on that acquisition as a huge, huge bonus to a team that has thrived without a center of any note. As a big Bogut fan, as an Australian, obviously Bogut was a good player, but he's just never had this kind of potential. The Warriors have never had this kind of center. So to see what Draymond and what Steph could do with someone of this talent, it leaves a lot of upside to be discovered. And hopefully for the Warriors' sake, that upside is discovered as soon as next year. And then let's get to the Draymond's perspective, because I'm probably higher on Draymond than a lot of people, Warriors fans aside. I'm not a Warriors fan, but I think Draymond's one of the most disrespected players, not just the last decade, of all time. He's not just someone that comes in and gives you 10 points a game and gives you 6 assists. Elevates his performance in the playoffs. One of the best passes in the league. So to think he's just going to lose that, and then he's had a chance to improve his three-point shooting, which needs a lot of improvement. Let's not get me wrong. And if it's not improved, I don't think it's the end of the world. But if he could get back to what he was doing a few years ago with his three-point shot, that would be huge, seeing as they've lost one of the best three-point shooters of all time in Klay Thompson. To do that and get back to his defensive and offensive best, he could help fill that hole that Klay's going to be leaving on the defensive end of the floor, at least. Obviously, from the shooting perspective, that's just really not going to be a hole that they can fill with anyone else. Even Kelly Oubre Jr., who I think is a good person to come in, another great option. Andrew Wiggins, he's got upside that we haven't seen before because he's played in pretty much bad situation after bad situation. We've seen players just look not great in that Minnesota kind of environment. So to come to a winning environment, who knows? Maybe he develops into the player that we hope he could be, and then maybe he gives them that upside, and all of a sudden he gives that defensive upside, which he definitely has, given the fact he can guard a few different positions. I'm not saying he's been a great defender in his time, but he's been an okay defender on not a great defensive team. And you come to a team with an elite kind of defender in Draymond Green, who not only is elite defensively, but he's elite in terms of verbally, and the impact that has on someone who might not know what to do all the times is huge. If Draymond's behind Wiggins and telling him where to go, what to rotate onto, how to push up the field, what to do, when to push, when to rotate, when to hedge, when to do all these things, those are things that you just can't look at in the stats sheet. That's why Draymond's so good, and that's why I think I want to see what he can do to this defense, because now he's got some upside pieces that the Warriors haven't had on defense in a while. You've got James Wiseman, you've got Oubre, you've got Wiggins. These are all very athletic guys that you would assume could make up a really good defensive quartet if you put him alongside a great defender like Draymond and in a great system, which they're looking to be in. Then there's no reason these guys can't turn into the high upside defenders that they've always promised they could be. And then that kind of makes up for some of the slack that Klay's left. In terms of free agency, they made a few nice signings. Kent Bazemore, I think, is a good signing. He's been an underrated player for quite some time. I like Brad Wanamaker. I know some people don't. I think Brad Wanamaker is a good backup point guard. I think he did well for the Celtics. In the draft, of course, they got Wiseman. They got Nico Mannion, who heading into the year was a lottery-type pick. Who knows what he can do? Eric Paschal's still got room to improve. Jordan Poole. There's still some room for improvement. And the other guy they got, can't think of his name off the top of my head, white guy, can shoot the ball. I've heard people say he could be Duncan Robinson 2.0. Now, it's easy to say that because he's white and he was drafted late. But I've heard people say from scouts, like he had a case for being a legitimate late first-round guy just given his shooting ability alone. So if you can bring that into the team, guys like Nico Mannion, you can see the mold they've been going for with those late first-round to late second-round picks. Mannion with the other white guy and with Jordan Poole, they're all guys that have been high-volume shooters and hopefully can turn into good three-point shooters, because they're going to need people to step up the slack. And look, there's room for upside on this Warriors team. Have every other team got better and have the Warriors just lost one of their best players? Yes. Does this Warriors team now have a bigger chip on their shoulder than they had heading into the year? Probably even more so. Do they have high upside defenders who might thrive in a better situation? Yes. They've got a lot of high upside guys that, given the right situation, might be able to thrive and might be able to make up for the loss of Klay, which again, like, don't get me wrong, this video isn't targeted at saying they're just going to make up for the loss of Klay and immediately going to be back into championship contention. But I'm just saying they've lost Klay Thompson. They've still got Steph, Draymond, and Steve Kerr. Put some respect on those three guys that have been constants in a team that has been one of the best teams of all time. And then you add in one of the most talented big men in the league in James Wiseman, some high upside guys in Wiggins, Oubre on the defensive end of the floor, and some shooters in Mannion and the white guy who I really should know his name by now. I should have just searched it up, but I think it's too late to go back, so we'll just call him the white guy at this point in time. You add all of those guys to a list that already has the core there, even without Klay. This team's not going to be out of the playoffs. I can guarantee you that. I guarantee the Warriors will be in the playoff picture. There's a lot of things that need to go right for them to be in that championship level contention, but this team has consistently pretty much got things right. So I think don't write them off just yet. I know people wanted to write them off heading into the year, and then Klay getting injured was a perfect excuse to do so. So people have rejoiced and they've been like, yes, we can write off the Warriors. They're finally done. They're not done just yet. As long as they have a guy named Steph Curry, and if they get a healthy Draymond Green, and then who knows what James Wiseman can do, who knows what these other upside draft picks can do and upside players. There's still potential for this team, and that's why I thought I'd make this video, because another setback has just led to the Warriors being written off even more than they were heading into the season. And I think that's a dangerous game to play, because this is one of the best teams of all time with one of the best players of all time and an incredibly good player in Draymond, an incredibly good coach, and some pieces that we just don't know. They could completely explode given their upside, given their talent, and given the environment. So I think that's why this team has potential to still be great, even given the injury to Klay Thompson, which is going to be incredibly hard to recover from. But if there's one team that can do it, it's this Golden State team. So that's why I think let's give them a chance to see what they can do and then write them off. If they're 40 games into the season and they're around 500, sure, they're not going to make it. But if they're 40 games into the season and they're 30-10, all of a sudden people are going to be saying, oh, it's unfair because they had the second overall pick. Wiggins obviously is like really talented. Oubre, they spent so much money on him, it's unfair. Steph was just tanking last year. Or Steve Kerr, yeah, they're going to say those kind of things. So if you did enjoy the video, a like would be greatly appreciated. Other than that, I'll catch you next time. Also subscribe to the channel as well, that'd be cool. So other than that, I'll catch you next time. Bye.